On Thursday evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, casually eyeing a cold bottle of Miller Lite. He had grabbed a six-pack earlier, not to drown himself in booze, but to keep a clear head for what could unfold later. The muffled music upstairs abruptly stopped, signaling that Laura was nearly done with her getting-ready routine. Usually, Thursdays had a rhythm of their own. Ethan worked late to give Laura time for her so-called ladies' nights. Their daughter, Emily, would be doted on by his parents, who loved spoiling their granddaughter, while Laura indulged in drinks with her coworkers. Ethan made sure to tie up loose ends on those nights, tackling work so he could leave early on Fridays for dedicated family time. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a well-oiled machine. Emily adored by her grandparents, Laura unwinding with friends, and Ethan keeping his household on track. But appearances, Ethan knew, could be deceiving. As he heard Laura heading toward the bathroom, Ethan's thoughts briefly wandered to his lunch with Jessica earlier that week. Those sandwiches from the deli had been good enough to make him think about stopping by for more, or perhaps seeing if they delivered. Jessica's text inviting him to meet had been a surprise, but not one he had ignored. He noticed her the moment she walked into the restaurant, her gaze sweeping the room until it settled on him. Ethan stood and gave a small nod. Jessica returned the gesture, making her way over. At 31, Jessica had a calm and composed demeanor that Ethan appreciated. Among Laura's exes, she was the only one who had married, and it showed in her maturity. She had a way of speaking directly without sugarcoating things, which Ethan admired. With her dark, wavy hair and sharp features, Jessica carried herself with understated confidence. Her husband, David, often referred to her as his greatest blessing, and Jessica, in turn, seemed genuinely happy in her marriage. Sliding into the seat across from him, Jessica greeted him with a polite smile. "Thanks for meeting me, Ethan. I know your schedule's tight." "Of course," Ethan replied, his tone neutral. "Though I'll admit, this feels a bit unusual, meeting you here without Laura. I don't normally dine out without her. But if this is about her, I'm listening. Is this about her birthday next month?" Jessica's face shifted slightly, a flicker of hesitation clouding her features. Ethan immediately caught on that this wasn't about planning a surprise. "Ethan," Jessica began, her voice quiet but firm, "I need to tell you something, and I know it's not going to be easy to hear. But if there's even a chance it can help you, I'm willing to risk it." "Then say it," Ethan said plainly, his eyes locked on hers. Taking a deep breath, Jessica leaned forward. "Laura has been seeing someone else. It started about 2 months ago." Ethan's expression hardened, though his voice stayed level. "That's a serious accusation, Jessica. Are you absolutely certain?" She nodded solemnly. "I wish I weren't. About 3 months ago, after you started that big project at work, Laura began acting differently. She was short-tempered at the office, distant whenever we went out. One night, after a few martinis, she let it slip that she was struggling. She said she felt neglected and like you two were just coasting through life. I told her she needed to talk to you about it, but Jessica trailed off, her guilt evident. Ethan didn't flinch. "And this man? Do you know who he is?" Jessica looked down briefly, then back up. "I only know what she shared that night. She said she hadn't gone all the way with him yet, but, Ethan, the fact that she's even entertaining this is alarming." The waiter approached, interrupting them briefly to take Jessica's order. She asked for a Cobb salad and lemon iced tea. Ethan stayed silent, his sharp gaze fixed on her as she resumed. "Ethan, I've always respected you. That's why I felt you needed to know. There's something else you should be aware of, though." "What is it?" he asked, his tone clipped. Jessica hesitated again. "My sister was there that night." "What does your sister have to do with this?" Ethan asked, his voice carrying a slight edge. Jessica sighed. "My sister is, let's just say, she doesn't hold herself to any moral standard. She encouraged Laura to live a little, which, coming from her, is code for reckless behavior. My parents were both cheaters, and she's followed in their footsteps. I try to shut it down, but you know how people are when they're tipsy. They say whatever feels good at the moment." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "So you're saying this mess started because your sister thought it was her place to egg Laura on?" Jessica nodded. "That's exactly what I'm saying. I am sorry, Ethan. I didn't want you blindsided, but I also didn't want this hanging over your marriage without you knowing. Ethan leaned back slightly, his gaze unwavering. You did the right thing by telling me. Now I'll take care of it. I don't know who started cheating first, Jessica admitted, leaning back slightly, but my parents were always at each other's throats about it. They claimed they were in love, as if that excused everything. When I was 17, I got fed up and asked why they were still together. They looked at me like I'd just landed from another planet. They said love was all that mattered. Jessica shook her head with a bitter smile. That warped view shaped both me and my sister, but in different ways. I saw the damage cheating causes and swore I'd never let it happen in my life. My sister, though, she took it as proof that cheating was fine, as long as you love the person. I care about her, but let's just say she's misguided. Ethan's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. So, your sister thought it was her place to encourage Laura? Jessica nodded hesitantly. Yeah, she told Laura that if she wasn't getting romance at home, she should find it elsewhere. I told her she was wrong, but then Hannah and Gail joined the conversation. They started talking about exploring options and keeping things secret. I'm pretty sure for them, it was all theoretical, just idle chatter. But Laura? She seemed intrigued. She told me later she'd never cheat on you, but I think those words planted doubts in her mind. Ethan's voice was firm. And why do you believe that? Jessica hesitated, clearly unsure how much more to share. Because she's been different ever since. Then there's Luke Jonas. That man is trouble. Luke, Ethan repeated, his tone steely. Tell me about him. Jessica took a deep breath, clearly reluctant but determined. Luke Jonas is, well, let's just say he's a predator. He's the type who thrives on the chase. He doesn't care if a woman is married or not, attractive or average. It's all a game to him. From what I've seen, your wife caught his eye almost immediately. He didn't act on it at first, but that changed a few weeks ago. He's been relentless since then. Ethan's gaze sharpened. Relentless how? Jessica sighed. They've been seen chatting together in the cafeteria at work, more often than I'm comfortable with. I've tried talking to Laura about it, but she gets defensive. She insists they're just friends and claims Luke listens to her, that he understands her problems. When I asked if she'd act that way if you were around, she blushed and admitted she wouldn't. Then she turned it back on you, saying you don't notice her anymore. Ethan's voice didn't waver. So she's using me as an excuse to entertain his advances? Jessica looked uncomfortable, but nodded. That's how it seems. Things settled down at work for a bit, and I thought it was over. But then, 3 weeks ago, something happened. What happened? Ethan demanded, his voice cold and direct. Jessica looked down, clearly struggling. It was at the Red Horse Bar again. We were there for a group dance night. Luke and his friends showed up, and Laura was drinking more than usual. Too much. Actually, Luke kept buying her drinks. By the time I took her to the restroom, she was completely inebriated. When we came out, she was holding her underwear. Ethan's expression darkened, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. She said it made her feel liberated, Jessica said, her voice quiet. I chalked it up to the alcohol and tried to get her to leave, but then I saw her and Luke dancing, and things got inappropriate. They were bumping into each other, simulating intimate acts on the dance floor. And then, during a song, she slipped her underwear into his pocket. Jessica swallowed hard, avoiding Ethan's intense gaze. Everyone in the bar saw it. There were whistles, laughter. Luke took it further, grabbing her and kissing her right there. One of his friends even recorded it on their phone. Ethan's voice cut through the tension like a knife. And what did Laura do? Jessica's face was grim. She didn't resist. She went along with it. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Ethan spoke, his tone as hard as steel. So she humiliated herself, and by extension me, in front of everyone. Jessica tried to interject, but Ethan raised a hand. Spare me the sympathy, Jessica. What's done is done. I need to know one thing. Has this escalated since then? Jessica hesitated. I don't think so. She's been distant with Luke at work, but yesterday I saw them talking again. They stopped when I approached, so I don't know what they were discussing. Ethan stood, signaling the conversation was over. Thank you for telling me. I'll handle it from here. Jessica reached for his hand. Ethan, I'm sorry. If you ever need to talk, I won't. Ethan interrupted firmly. But I appreciate your honesty. He paid the bill and walked out without a backward glance, his mind already focused on his next move. This wasn't a time for self-pity or doubt. Laura had crossed the line, and Ethan wasn't the type of man to let that go unanswered. This project's completion was a massive milestone, ensuring it would be delivered 2 months ahead of schedule. The financial savings for the military were staggering, and Ethan knew the bonus he'd earn would be equally substantial. It wasn't just about the money, though. The project's success would cement his reputation in his field. It should have been a moment of pride, a chance to savor his accomplishments. But instead, Ethan found himself preoccupied with an entirely different matter. The thought of returning home to face Laura unsettled him. Not because he feared the confrontation, but because he was determined to get to the bottom of things. He had resolved to investigate further, even if it meant going down routes he'd never considered before. Laura's work email was out of reach thanks to HR's oversight, but Ethan doubted anything incriminating would be there. Logging into her Yahoo account had revealed nothing suspicious, but she could easily have another email account he wasn't aware of. While the idea of installing security cameras or recording devices crossed his mind, Ethan dismissed it. Those tactics felt unnecessary, at least for now. Instead, he would gather information methodically, keeping his ultimate goal in sight, determining whether his marriage was worth salvaging, or if it was time to end it. That evening, Laura had already picked up Emily from his parents' house and had texted Ethan to bring Chinese food home for dinner. When he asked what she wanted, she had responded with her usual playful tone. After 10 years together, 8 of them married, shouldn't you know by now? Ethan's reply had been pointed, just making sure you're still content with the arrangement. Her immediate phone call following the text had caught him off guard. She brushed off his sarcasm, even throwing in a request for an extra egg roll for Emily. Had it been any other day, Ethan might have looked forward to an earlier-than-usual return home. He'd been working late for months, and a quiet dinner with Laura and Emily would have been a welcome change. But tonight, everything felt tainted by the revelations swirling in his mind. Still, he knew this was no time to tip his hand. As he stepped through the front door, Ethan noticed Laura in the kitchen, reaching for a bottle of wine. For a brief moment, he paused, silently taking in her figure. At 31, Laura was undeniably in her prime. Standing 5 feet tall with curves that even loose sweatpants couldn't hide, she exuded a natural allure. Her hair, tied back in a simple ponytail, framed a face that could still light up a room. When she turned to face him with a radiant smile, Ethan felt a fleeting pang of what used to be admiration. But reality hit him harder than any memory. "I'm so glad you're home, honey. How was work?" she asked, walking over to kiss him. "It went well," Ethan replied, his tone neutral but steady. "We've made a major breakthrough on supplies, which means the project could wrap up at least a month ahead of schedule. I know I've been away a lot, and I hate that I can't share details since it's classified, but I want you to know, this is temporary. You and Emily are my priorities always." Laura's eyes seemed to flicker with something. Guilt, perhaps? Or was he just imagining it? Ethan cursed his inability to read people sometimes. He had always preferred straightforward communication, expecting others to be as direct as he was. "Oh, darling," Laura replied, her voice soft. "We both adore you, and we understand. I do wish there was more of you around, but I know this won't last forever. Still, I'm glad you're acknowledging it." Her voice wavered slightly, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if she was genuinely emotional, or simply putting on an act. She quickly pivoted the conversation. "So, what does finishing early mean for you? A bonus?" Ethan nodded. "A significant one, though I won't know the exact amount until it's finalized. More importantly, it sets me up for opportunities with other government contractors. This project's success will open doors, and I might even negotiate a few perks. It's a big deal for my career." "That's wonderful," Laura said, unpacking the food containers. "You deserve it." Ethan's gaze remained fixed on her as she moved. "So, what bar are you and the girls going to tomorrow night? Should I stop by after work to make sure you all have rides home?" Laura hesitated, her eyes dropping to her plate. "Oh, actually, we're planning to go to the Red Horse Bar again, but I think we'll be done before you're even out of work." Ethan noted the subtle shift in her demeanor. That was all he needed to hear. The rest of the evening unfolded in the usual rhythm. Dinner, bedtime stories for Emily, and a quiet moment of reflection. After tucking his daughter into bed, Ethan returned downstairs to find Laura asleep on the couch, her book abandoned in her lap. For a fleeting moment, the sight tugged at him. Memories of better days when trust wasn't a question. But trust was now very much the question. Quietly, Ethan retrieved Laura's phone from the nightstand. It wasn't hard to unlock. He knew the code. Scrolling through her messages, he quickly found the thread he was looking for. The exchanges with Luke were carefully worded, but unmistakable in their intent. Vicky gave me a talking to today about our lunch breaks. I was annoyed, but she picked up on everything. Exactly. I don't want any misunderstandings. She asked if Bob would approve of how we've been acting, which got me thinking. We might be giving off the wrong signals. Plus, I shouldn't be confiding all my issues to another guy. I'll try talking to Bob. I understand, but if you can't get his attention, you know where to find me. I'll even treat you to dinner. Just as friends, of course. Ethan frowned. There was no record of Laura ever trying to have such a conversation with him. And Luke's persistence? It was clear what he wanted. Further down, the messages became even more damning. You have to return them today. What are you referring to? You know very well. My friends are furious with me right now, and I don't blame them. If Ethan finds out I behave like some kind of, well, he might leave me. So you don't want me to show him the video? What video? No one at work can see this. Sam was there, and he captured it on his phone. I'll make sure he deletes it, but you owe me. Okay. Ethan's jaw tightened as he locked the phone and placed it back where he'd found it. The weight of what he'd read settled over him, but his resolve was unshaken. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about control, accountability, and setting things straight. Tomorrow, Ethan would start taking action. I can't lose Ethan. Not after last night. What happened last night? That's none of your business. Was he upset you came home late and drunk? Very funny. No, something happened that changed everything. Let's leave it at that. So a little dirty dancing with me made you work for your husband's forgiveness? You should be thanking me. You're disgusting. Last night was unforgettable because Ethan and I love each other. Now give me back my underwear and make sure that damn video is gone. Relax. You make it sound like you're ashamed of having fun. Ethan's lucky to have you. I don't need anyone watching over me. Just do what I asked. Handle the video, and let's move on. Of course. Afterward, maybe you can treat me to dinner? Just ensure no one ever sees that video, and we're done. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened as he continued reading. The timeline unraveled further, the messages weaving a story of poor decisions and deliberate deceit. I heard the bachelorette party is canceled. How about dinner with me? That's not a good idea. Come on, your husband will be at work, and the girls left you alone. One night with a friend to catch up, like old times. Fine, but just dinner. I'm grateful you made sure that video disappeared. Great. Meet me at TGF in the Sharon Hotel. It's quiet, no drunk idiots, and if we drink too much, I'll get a room. It's just dinner, and I mean it. Don't worry about the video. Sam deleted it, and soon, someone else will cause a scene at work, and this will blow over. See you at 8. Ethan set the phone back on the nightstand, his mind methodically processing everything he'd uncovered. It was no longer about suspicions or doubts. Laura had crossed the line. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. Her willingness to meet Luke at a hotel restaurant, with him suggesting a room just in case, sealed it. This was no marriage anymore. It was a mockery of one. Laura descended the stairs, her little black dress clinging to her in all the right places. Ethan had always loved seeing her in it, until tonight. The dress was unmistakably the one she saved for their dates, and now she was wearing it for someone else. Pausing at the bottom of the stairs, she spotted Ethan seated at the dining table, his expression unreadable. I didn't expect you to be home so early today, baby, she said, her tone faltering. Ethan didn't waste time with pleasantries. We need to talk, Laura, he said flatly. His voice was calm, but there was no warmth. This might be the most important conversation we ever have. Sit down. Her hesitation was brief as she complied, sitting across from him. She reached for his hand instinctively, but Ethan pulled his away. I know there's no bachelorette party tonight, he began, his tone unwavering. I know you've been seeing Luke Jonas behind my back. Ethan, please, let me explain, she started, but he cut her off, slamming his fist against the table. Damn it, Laura! You don't get to explain yet, he snapped. You're going to sit there and listen. For once, just listen. She flinched, tears welling in her eyes, but Ethan's expression remained impassive. I know you kissed that idiot at lunch. I know you danced with him at the Red Horse Bar. I know you took off your underwear and gave them to him in the middle of a crowded dance floor. I know you were all over me 3 weeks ago because he had you riled up. And I know tonight, you're meeting him for dinner at a hotel restaurant. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. Ethan, don't, he interrupted, his voice cold. I just don't know if you've slept with him yet. But based on everything I've seen, I'm not sure what would stop you if you haven't. He leaned forward, his gaze cutting through her like a knife. You lied to me, Laura. You lied by omission about Luke. You lied about your little stunt at the bar. And you lied about tonight. I've been working to provide for this family, to give us all a better future, and you've been out humiliating me. The silence hung heavy between them as Ethan leaned back in his chair, his next words measured but firm. So here's how this is going to work. You've got 3 options. He raised a finger. Option 1. You walk out that door right now and go to Luke. I don't care if you sleep with him or not. You can start your new life with him tonight. This choice will end our marriage, Laura. No reconciliation. No second chances. Ethan raised a second finger. Option 2. You sit here all night and try to convince me to save this marriage. I won't lie. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. Right now, I don't believe a word that comes out of your mouth. But if you manage to convince me, and that's a big if, there's a 50% chance I might try to work through this. He raised a third finger. Option 3. You take me with you tonight. We'll confront Luke together. You will tell him to his face that this relationship ends here and now. No contact, no excuses. Then, you'll let me speak to him privately. I don't care what you have to say about it. This is the only option that earns you any respect from me and gives us a real shot at salvaging this marriage. Ethan leaned back, folding his arms as he stared her down. If you slept with him or crossed any other line, this is your only chance to come clean. It won't fix everything, but it's the bare minimum required for me to even consider moving forward. Laura looked as though she might be sick, her face pale and her hands trembling. Option 1, 2, or 3, Laura. What's it going to be? The question lingered in the air, tension building with each passing second. Laura's lips quivered as she stared at him, tears threatening to spill. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I need to talk to you, to explain everything. I didn't ask for your apology or an explanation yet. Ethan cut in sharply. I asked for your decision. Her voice trembled. I'll choose option 3. I'll take you with me. Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised but unmoved. Didn't expect that, he said curtly. Well, at least you've got enough sense left to face the consequences. She nodded, still looking nauseous, but there was a flicker of resolve in her expression. I want to fix this, Ethan. I really do. We'll see about that, he muttered, grabbing his keys. Let's go. Ethan opened the car door for Laura out of habit, though the gesture felt hollow. She nearly broke down in tears at the simple act, but he was unmoved. As he started driving, she glanced at him hesitantly. I really messed everything up, didn't I? She asked quietly. Yes, Laura, Ethan replied flatly, eyes focused on the road. You really did. Her voice cracked as she asked, what can I do to fix this? Ethan thought for a moment, his voice calm but unyielding. Complete honesty for starters. No more lies or omissions, ever. I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently you think it's acceptable to withhold things that I need to know. You also need to find a way to make me believe what you say. That's your burden, not mine. He continued, his tone firm. And Luke? He's dead to you. If we stay together, you don't speak to him, look at him, or even acknowledge him. If he shows up somewhere, you leave. If you can't leave, you call me immediately. No drinks, no gifts, no excuses. Cut him off completely. Ethan didn't stop there. When we get home tonight, you'll tell me everything. Don't give me your thoughts or excuses. I want the truth. If you have any resentment toward me, lay it out. And lastly, we're going to marriage counseling. Find a counselor. I don't care if you pick one or ask Ron for recommendations. Laura's phone chimed, interrupting the moment. She glanced down and visibly flinched. It's him, she murmured. Ethan held out his hand. Give it to me. Without a word, she handed him the phone. Ethan scrolled through the messages, his expression darkening. Him. Hey, I booked a room with a jacuzzi. Maybe we can relax after lunch. Bring your bikini. Her. You can't get me drunk enough to take a hot bath with you. I'm not bringing the bikini. Him. We'll see. You know what happens when you drink. You might not need it. Him. Where are you? I've had a glass of wine while waiting. Are you bringing a surprise? Ethan handed the phone back to her, his face unreadable. You realize these messages don't exactly paint you in a good light, right? If I scroll further, will it get worse? Laura hung her head. Ethan, I swear I only intended to have dinner tonight. I never planned to sleep with him. He regarded her with cold detachment. Were you planning to give him your underwear again? Or does that require a dance floor? Her face turned ghostly pale, her lips trembling. I know. Of course not. Good, Ethan said, his tone like ice. We're almost there. Fix your makeup and figure out what you're going to say to him. The drive ended in silence, Laura dabbing at her face and reapplying mascara with shaky hands. When they arrived, she hesitated before stepping out of the car. As they entered the hotel's restaurant, a hostess greeted them with a polite smile. Are you a party of two? Before Ethan could reply, Laura interjected, her voice shaky. We're meeting someone who's already here. The hostess nodded and gestured for them to look around. Laura nudged Ethan with her elbow, directing him toward a table at the back. There sat Luke, casually scrolling through his phone, a smug look plastered on his face. As Laura approached the table, Luke looked up, his grin widening. The grin disappeared the moment his eyes landed on Ethan. Luke, Laura began, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her expression. This is my husband, Ethan Morgan. Ethan stood behind her, his presence looming as she continued. Ethan and I have talked, and I've realized the damage my actions have caused. For the first time in our marriage, I've given him reason to doubt me, and I take full responsibility. From this moment forward, I want nothing to do with you. There's no reason for you to call, text, or contact me in any way. Her voice grew firmer. I'll be informing HR tomorrow about the inappropriate nature of our interactions. I'll do whatever it takes to repair my marriage, starting with ending this now. Ethan's eyes locked onto Luke. Now, Luke, I think it's time you and I had a little chat, just the two of us. Luke's face betrayed the first flicker of fear as Ethan's voice dropped to a menacing calm. Laura hesitated briefly, then turned toward Ethan. Her voice trembled but held conviction. I'll be at the bar. Any attempt to speak to me about anything other than work will be unwelcome. Before leaving, she leaned in and kissed Ethan lightly, her eyes searching his for any sign of forgiveness. I'm truly sorry, she whispered, before walking away to sit at the bar. Ethan couldn't help but glance at her retreating figure. Despite everything, part of him hoped she truly understood the gravity of her actions. With that, Ethan slid into the seat opposite Luke, his eyes cool and calculating as he sized up the man who had inserted himself into his life. Luke had dark hair, a lean build, and was impeccably dressed. He might be considered attractive, though Ethan wasn't one to assess another man's looks. What drew his attention was the faint unease in Luke's demeanor, betrayed by the nervous glances he shot at the untouched glass of wine on the table. Ethan's voice broke the silence. So, you thought it'd be a fun surprise to picture her in a bikini? He kept his tone light, almost mocking. Luke's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained it. Do you really believe she's told you everything? He asked, leaning back with a self-assured grin. Ethan felt a strange sense of calm now that the moment had arrived. Actually, yes. I've known her for 10 years, married for 8. I know her better than you do, better than you could in 3 months of chasing her. The waiter interrupted to take Ethan's order. A double Johnny Walker Black. On ice, Ethan said without breaking eye contact with Luke. Luke chuckled nervously. She's quite the woman, isn't she? Knows how to keep a man happy. Ethan grinned back, but there was no warmth in it. That's true, but I don't think you'd know from experience. Luke laughed awkwardly. Need proof? Ethan leaned forward slightly. If you had proof, you wouldn't need to drug her to get your way. The color drained from Luke's face. Ethan's guess had landed squarely. What are wannabe predators using these days? Ethan continued. GHB? Rohypnol? Ecstasy? Luke flinched visibly, confirming Ethan's suspicion. Ethan leaned further across the table, his voice low and sharp. You're a coward. A pathetic excuse for a man. I should beat you senseless right here, but then I'd miss the opportunity to make sure you stay out of our lives for good. The waiter returned with Ethan's scotch just as he sat back, exuding control. He took a long sip, letting the burn center him before continuing. Here's how this works, Luke. You've got 3 options, and I suggest you choose wisely. Ethan raised a finger. Option 1. You leave now. You apologize to my wife on your way out. Tomorrow, you resign from your job, pack your bags, and get the hell out of this city. If you do that, I won't pursue you. Another finger went up. Option 2. You walk into the nearest police station and confess that you spiked her drink. Serve your time, and I'll ensure you never cross paths with my family again. Finally, a third finger. Option 3. We sign up for a boxing match. 4 weeks from now, you and I will step into a ring, sign injury waivers, and settle this like men. Neither of us leaves until one of us passes out. When you wake up, you still leave the city. Luke's smug expression faltered, replaced with unease. And if I don't choose any of these ridiculous options, he sneered. Ethan smiled coldly. Because then, every time you walk to your car at night, you'll wonder if I'm waiting in the shadows to break your legs. Every time you open your front door, you'll worry if I'm there to drag you out and make you regret ever crossing me. You think you're safe at a bar? What if your drink gets spiked, Luke? How's it feel to wonder if you'll be the next victim? The color drained from Luke's face, but he forced out a weak laugh. You're bluffing. Ethan leaned back, swirling his drink casually. You're welcome to test me, but I'd think carefully before calling my bluff. Luke's composure crumbled. He glanced toward the bar where Laura sat, her back turned to him. She said you'd be pissed, he muttered, more to himself. Ethan set his glass down with deliberate precision. Pissed doesn't cover it, Luke. But let me make one thing clear. This is your only warning. Choose now, or you won't get another chance. For the first time, Luke looked genuinely afraid. Ethan reached into his pocket, activating the voice recorder on his phone. Let's hear it, Luke. Which option will it be? Luke's eyes darted toward the bar again, desperation beginning to seep through his feigned composure. You really think you've got the upper hand, don't you? He muttered, trying to salvage some semblance of control. Ethan didn't flinch. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. You're stalling, Luke. The longer you sit here without choosing, the more it looks like you're guilty of everything I suspect, and worse. So, unless you want me to start dialing the police myself, I suggest you pick an option. Now! Luke's face twisted into a mix of fear and anger. Fine, he hissed. Option 1. I'll leave town, resign from my job, and stay away from you and Laura. Ethan leaned back, his expression unchanging. Smart choice. But you're going to do more than that. You're going to apologize to my wife before you leave. And tomorrow, you'll email HR and explain that you're stepping down for personal reasons. I'll be checking. Luke nodded reluctantly, his defiance slowly draining away. Yeah, okay. Phoenix. Ethan picked up his scotch, taking another measured sip before standing. Good? I'd suggest you start packing tonight. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, satisfied that the recorder had captured the entire exchange. As Ethan turned to leave, Luke called out, his voice edged with bitterness. You think you've won, don't you? Ethan paused, looking over his shoulder. It's not about winning, Luke. It's about protecting what's mine. And if you ever forget that, I'll be here to remind you. Ethan found Laura sitting stiffly at the bar, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her glass of water. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of apprehension and hope. "It's done," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "He's leaving town. You won't hear from him again." Laura swallowed hard, nodding. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan regarded her for a long moment. "Don't thank me yet. We've still got a lot to work through." She reached out hesitantly, her hand hovering near his arm before she let it fall back to her lap. "I know," she murmured. "I'll do whatever it takes, Ethan. Just tell me where to start." He exhaled, his eyes softening slightly. "We start by being honest. Completely. No more half-truths. No more omissions. If we're going to move forward, we can't have any more secrets between us." Laura nodded, her gaze steady. "I'll tell you everything. I promise." "Good," Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Then let's go home." The fallout from the confrontation had far-reaching consequences, but Ethan was determined to navigate them on his terms. Luke's resignation was processed without fanfare, his departure from the city swift and uneventful. The charges against him for drug possession and attempted assault ensured he wouldn't be troubling anyone else for years. For Ethan and Laura, the road to reconciliation was far from smooth. Counseling sessions became a staple of their routine, forcing them to confront their issues head-on. Through honest conversations, they began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Ethan also took steps to ensure their future was secure. He devoted more time to his family, stepping back from high-stakes projects to prioritize his role as a husband and father. Laura, too, made significant changes, focusing on repairing their bond and earning back the trust she had jeopardized. In time, they found a new rhythm, a partnership built on resilience and hard-earned lessons. Though the scars of betrayal lingered, they chose to move forward together, determined to prove that their marriage was worth fighting for. And as Ethan often reminded himself, sometimes the hardest battles yield the strongest victories.